How the heck are you supposed to make GA4 work for PPC? How can you ensure you're baking business objectives into your KPIs? What are the best ways to optimize your Google Merchant Center feed? Answers to those questions are coming up right now. Welcome to ppc.zone July 2024. I'm your host, Jyll Saskin Gales. I use the pronouns she and her. I'm a Google Ads coach, ex-Googler, and the founder of Inside Google Ads. I created ppc.zone in 2022 to elevate new perspectives and insights in our industry. Whether you're tuning in live, watching the replay on YouTube or LinkedIn, or listening in your podcast app, here's what you can expect. 3 speakers will share their expertise in a 7-minute presentation each. Then we'll answer your questions in a live panel and wrap it all up in under an hour. Before we get to our first speaker, ppc.zone is sponsored by PPC Live and Inside Google Ads. PPC Live hosts in-person events bringing real people together to solve real problems with real solutions. Their next event is tomorrow, July 25th at 5:30 p.m. in London, and tickets are still available. Go to ppc.live to get your ticket to the next event. That's ppc.live. Inside Google Ads is the training program you need to become a Google Ads expert. With more than 100 in-platform tutorials that are constantly updated as Google Ads changes, Inside Google Ads will show you how to get Google Ads working for your business. Get 20% off your first month or first year with code PPCZone. Go to learn.jyll.ca to learn more. That's learn.jyll.ca. Our first speaker in the zone has been a paid search specialist since 2006. She's a complete data nerd, her words, not mine, and perhaps one of the very few who loves the new GA4. Don't hold it against her, because she's experienced in the travel and e-commerce industries, working with budgets of all sizes. Now, she's here to share her perspective on GA4 tips for PPC. Please welcome Thuha Wright.
Hello. Hi. So today I'm going to go through the reports that I use when I am looking at paid search data, as it were. Just a little bit about me. I've worked in paid search since 2006, and I've been freelancing since 2018 as a digital seamstress. And you're probably thinking, if I'm working in paid search, why am I talking about GA4? And as Jyll said, I am a data nerd. I do love data, and any excuse to get into GA4, I'm there. So what I find is when people get into GA4, the first mistake they make is they're not asking the questions, as it were. They're just hoping that they'll go into GA4 and hoping that it will have all the magic answers for them. But the reality is you get the best out of it if you have questions in mind. So some questions you may have are, which channel is driving the most users, or which channel are driving the most users, and which are generating the most revenue. You can actually interchange that word channel with campaign. So I'll give you some examples of data that I get. So the first report that I would use is the user acquisition report. So this report tells you how many users came from each of the channels. Now, one thing that I've noticed in the last few years is that people don't realise that there's this blue plus button. And when you click on this blue plus button, you can add another dimension. And adding another dimension will give you a bit more depth into the data, and you can find out a bit more about perhaps a specific campaign that you're running. One thing to note is that Google will often talk about dimensions and scope, and there's certain metrics that you can only view with certain dimensions. So when you're using the user acquisition report, you want to use any dimensions that has the first user in front of it. So for instance, if I wanted to look at which campaigns drove users, I would add first user campaign as my dimension column. The second report that I use often is the traffic acquisition report. So this report tells you how much traffic each of the channel drives. So if you are running paid search, for instance, you can compare how much traffic you're sending compared to organic search or organic social or even paid social. And just to give you that idea of how you fit in with all the other channels. And again, with traffic, it's all about sessions. So if you're going to add any other dimensions with that magic blue button, then use the session campaign dimension. My third report is the attribution path. So this is found in the advertising section on the left-hand side. And I often use this to see how different channels play and what touch points they have in a customer's journey. So the line 42 that I've highlighted here in this screenshot, this is where if you'd looked at that traffic report, it would have said that organic search had won that key event. However, paid search played a part has played a part in that journey. And so for me, that would say, well, I'm not going to discount paid search because it actually helped drive traffic to the website. The next report in the same section is the attribution model. And this looks at comparing the last click model with the data-driven model. And I like to use this report to kind of get a feel of how I should split the budget. So from this report, I would say that paid search, organic social, and organic shopping actually drives revenue, has more value in driving revenues than it actually does if you use the last click model. And so I would make sure that there is sufficient budget to keep running those channels. And then lastly, and so I think my slides have finished. Oh, hang on. Okay, so those are my three reports. So the user acquisition report, the traffic acquisition report, and the attribution model. So I hope you found that useful.
Thank you so much, Thuha, for sharing your unique perspective and insights with us in the zone. If you'd like to connect with Thuha Wright, you can find her on LinkedIn. And if you have a question for Thuha, you can go ahead and type it into the chat if you're watching live on YouTube or LinkedIn right now, and we'll get to your questions during the upcoming live panel. Next up in the zone, this speaker is the head of paid media at Evoluted. After nearly 10 years in the hospitality industry, he took the leap into digital marketing, and we're glad he did. Over the last 5 years, he has come from being a marketing executive in a family-run stockholding company to leading the paid media team and promoting positive well-being. Today, he's going to share his perspective with us on how to bake business objectives into your KPIs and account. Please welcome Chris Ridley.
Thanks, Jyll, for that introduction. As Jyll's mentioned, I'll be introducing how to bake your business objectives into your KPIs. The objective for this 7-minute talk is to teach you the basics to align your KPIs for your marketing channels with your business's overall objectives and their own KPIs, or at least with your marketing department's goals or the internal marketing department you're working with. Sometimes you can't always link it straight to the top, but making sure that those line managers and those key account holders you're working with are all on the same page with you is the next best thing. So before we dive into it, I need you all to ask yourself a few questions. Have you ever hit your targets just for someone to tell you it wasn't good enough and they weren't seeing the returns they wanted? Have you ever been asked to set targets without any context about how much they need it to be, or what actually happens after you get that lead in? And have you ever been forced to give targets without even considering your agency costs being factored into it? Or if you're in-house, your own salary and costs factored into it? If you answered yes to any of these or all of them like I have, then you're in the right place, and I'll be able to help you make sure the KPIs that you set take all of that into consideration, and in the end helps the business know that they're generating positive return on investment. We have to understand that there are a lot of factors going into these, and that big issues we saw with those 3 questions is none of these were taken into consideration. So let's have a look at these numbers then, and let's get stuck into the maths. Some of the variables important to us are ad cost, so your media spend, outsourcing rates, so that could be the agency you're using, and or your own salary if you are in-house. You've got to make sure that you're covering your own salary, because if you factor that in, that will blow the mind of your line managers and the stakeholders, and they'll really not have anything to say except for wow. Any software subscriptions, this is often overlooked, but if you're using anything like Ahrefs, Optio, any other tools that are third party that have a cost to them, you need to factor them in when you're trying to work out if you're doing a positive return on investment within your marketing campaigns. Also, whether tax or VAT needs to be considered. A lot of businesses normally do pre-tax, but it might be worth just checking with your line manager or your point of contact in agency to see if that's the case. Then also refunds and cancellations. These are often overlooked, but you might get a conversion, you might get a sale, but if you don't know if they've actually kept as a conversion or if they've just pulled out at the last minute, you're still going to be counting that as a success when it wasn't. So getting those rough averages will help you in the long run. Also, profit margin. This is especially important if you are doing e-commerce. Know what the profit margin is. You can then tell your employers or your clients that you are bringing a profit into the business, or you can see if you're looking at a loss, what you need to do to improve that. And then we've also got average order value or lifetime value. Lifetime value is usually used for more lead gen and bigger funnels where you can attribute sales back to the first point. But average order values can also work if you don't have those data available to you. And finally, we also have the lead to sale conversion rate, which is particularly important for lead gen. While you might get a lead in, you don't know if they're actually spam and just not a good quality one, or if we lost them in the last minute. So being able to track that will be really useful. And even just having an average for that conversion rate, you can make estimates on how many of your leads turn into actual sales. However, if you don't know your profit margin, like I've mentioned, you won't know if you're running at a profit or loss. So if you're being given KPIs regarding finances and making sure that your work is a profitable campaign, you've got to make sure you know the profit margin, even an average one for the business, to calculate that backwards. So you're probably asking, how do you do this? How do we do all this, Chris? It's great showing us all these different variables, but how do we put them together? And how do we work out what they each are? My answer to you is use your words. Speak to those people in the company that have these knowledge. Speak to the finance team to work out the profit margin. Speak to the sales team to find out how many of your leads turn into sales and how many of them are actually spam. Speak to everyone and anyone you need to get an insight into cancellation rates, refund rates, any other costs, the cost of your subscriptions. And at that point, we can start baking. And with all good baking sessions, you need a cookbook. And this cookbook will include all of the important formulas we need to use to start working out some of these KPIs. For example, we need to first work out costs, and that's overall costs, whether that is your ad costs, outsourcing costs, salaries, and software subscriptions. You need that if we want to work out if we're running at a profit or the return on investment. We also need to work out expected sales for lead gen. This is the number of leads you get times by your lead to sales conversion rate. So if you only convert 20 of them, those 10 leads you got, if you only get 20%, those 10 leads you got are only actually 2 sales. With that, we can then look at revenue, where you're taking this expected sales we've just calculated, calculate that by average order value, and then deduct the reduction rate from it. So if you have refund and cancellation rate of 7%, you times it by 0.93 to work that out. And that would take all of those out for you. You've also got return on investment there. As we've worked out revenue, we can then divide the overall cost that we have at the top and -1 afterwards to work out the return on investment. You then can estimate your profit as well. And this is the revenue number we worked out earlier, times the profit margin that your finance team should provide you, deducting all of your costs. And finally, we have the profit over investment, or return of profit. And what this is estimated profit, we've just calculated, divided by costs -1. You know, like I said, sit down with your line managers and ask them what returns they need to see from your campaigns to deem it a success. Once you've done that, you'll then be able to calculate a break-even point for you. For return on investment, you want 1 as your minimum, that's break-even. For profit over investment, you need a 0. Anything above those numbers, I'm making a profit for you. Thank you for coming to my talk. If you need to contact me in any way or want to connect, here are all my contact details.
Thank you so much to Chris for sharing your unique perspective and insights with us in the Zone. And as you can see, if you'd like to connect with Chris Ridley, you can find him on X and on LinkedIn. All right, if you are just tuning in, PPC Zone is sponsored by PPC Live and Inside Google Ads. PPC Live hosts in-person events bringing real people together to solve real problems with real solutions. Go to ppc.live to get your ticket to the next event. That's ppc.live. Inside Google Ads is the training program you need to become a Google Ads expert. Get 20% off your first month or first year with code PPCZone. Go to learn.jyll.ca to learn more. That's learn.jyll.ca. Our final speaker in the Zone today has more than 13 years of paid media experience, specializing in PPC and paid social. She offers consultancy, audits, management, and training for global brands and agencies. We're about to hear her unique perspective on top tips for optimizing your merchant feed. Please welcome Meriem Nacer.
Hello. Hi, everybody. So today I will be taking you through my top 3 tips for optimizing a merchant feed, which is the information I normally share to many people across the communities I tend to write in, as well as just in general chats and conversations with many clients and agencies. So a little bit about me. So I am a PPC specialist, as Jyll said. I'm also a gamer and a crafter by night. I've been working in PPC since 2010. I've worked across lots of clients, and I also got shortlisted this year for Digital Marketeer of the Year 2024. So one of the things you might know is that there are now 2 forms of the Merchant Center. So you have the old school normal Merchant Center, which most people are still using. And then recently, you've got the Google Merchant Center Next. That was announced in May 2023 and then started rolling out a little bit more over the last year. Most people I know at the moment haven't migrated to it yet because there are a lot of things missing from it. One of them being supplement feeds, which is where we optimize our feeds a lot, sorting out titles and many other challenges which we have in the feed. As of 2 weeks ago, I saw Kirk put on LinkedIn that it's now available. So I wouldn't say everybody rush and go and use it yet, but definitely start investing some time into understanding what you can do in there. There are some great features like AI product images, and also they do site scrapes, which the normal Merchant Center doesn't do at the moment. So it's definitely something to start looking into, but be careful and make sure everything's in there before you migrate over. One of the core areas which when I do feed audits, I look at is the categorization. So this is kind of my core area, which I tell everybody to look at when they're trying to figure out what's going on with their feed, why it's not showing, and all the challenges there. And in the initial area, it is the Google product category. So anybody who's looked in a feed before, you'll be like, what's a Google product category? Normally, this is passed from the feed, the back-end feed from the website. However, a lot of websites which aren't on the normal platforms like Shopify have to be manually added. And I have found many a very large retailer who don't pass these through. For example, I had a client who did Warhammer little figurines, and what happened was they didn't pass anything for the Google products. So half of the materials for the arts and crafting were coming up about things like car parts and random things like that, which obviously wasn't relevant at all. So when those products were serving in the SERP, unfortunately, they were coming up against wrong products. So if there's anything I recommend you do today is go and have a look, pull a report and have a look at your feed categorization under Google product categories. There is a Google Sheet which you can use, which is the example on this screen, and it will tell you what to categorize it under, and you literally can just Control F it. It's a spreadsheet, and all PPCers know spreadsheets, hopefully, and you'll definitely be able to see all of that and be able to clean up your feed and make sure that it is categorized correctly in Google's eyes. Another category area is Google product type. So many people think it's the same as the other part, which I spoke about, but this isn't. This is where you would build it upon your website. So for example, if you're Marks and Spencer's and you have women's clothing and you have a dress, you have up to 5 sections where you can add relevant keywords to recategorize your feed and tell Google, okay, I've already told you that I do women's clothing or apparel. This is a woman's dress. This is a midi dress. This dress has sleeves. It's worn in summer. And then you can also add things like a promotion or an event. One of the key things which I always use when I'm using product types is I use trends as well as what's going on. So for example, I had a client, they were a gaming brand, and we wanted to test out Black Friday. We were a little bit wild, and we had a Black Friday sale across all of our products. Unfortunately, we saw a lot of impressions, not many clicks, so we removed it within 24 hours because it didn't do any good. So I would say don't add random things where you might get loads of interest but no clicks. Add something relevant. So for example, for a women's clothing brand, you could add Mother of the Bride or Mother's Day gifts and relevant areas like that. I definitely recommend reviewing your Google products, because a lot of the time there's like some things like a singular word is passed from the back-end systems, and I would definitely recommend testing and learning and overriding this and seeing what you can get out of it. And the next section is Google product titles. So these are the product titles of your items which you're passing through from the back end. The challenge you have is that most websites have 2 titles. They have a short form title, which is on your website, and then you have an SEO title, which is normally hidden in the back end, which is speaking to Google in general. For starters, make sure the correct title is being passed, which is normally, I would recommend your SEO title, because they always do a better job with titles. Off the back of that, then review what's actually been passed, because you can optimize this. You can utilize information in your feed and use Google Merchant Center rules to pass the information to the title so you can extend it. So what makes a good title? Ensuring that the core information is in it. So the product type, whether it's a dress or a shoe or a sandal, making sure that that right information is there. One of the other things to note is, whilst the product type, the color, the size, the material, and the brand is important, dress isn't really going to sell them the dress, especially when there's so many styles of dress, whether it's a midi, a maxi, and with sleeves, without sleeves. leopard print, not leopard print. There's so many variations that you need to make sure that that is covered within that title to make so that when people are looking at it, they get the gist of what they're clicking through on, as well as the picture. So an example of these titles are here. So you can see that there's multiple dresses and there's multiple sandals. You only have 150 characters to showcase the information. However, not all of those characters show. And because of that, you need to ensure that the right information is at the top. So you can see that the ASOS design, for example, takes up the majority of the title, but it's ASOS, so a lot of people probably would click through. Whereas if I'm looking for a halter neck dress and this halter neck dress is showcasing and literally tells me it's halter neck, it's very likely I'd click on that. Similar with sandals. So you can see on the right, this is a mobile search. The core information, women's vegan leather cross strap sandal. If I'm looking for something similar to that straight away, seeing that and the terminology of vegan, if that's something which I'm looking for, is absolutely perfect. And that's how you get a strong click-through rate. When testing your titles, just make sure that you test sections and don't just try and, recreate the wheel and create everything and change everything at once, because you actually want to learn from it. So just make sure each time you're reviewing, you're testing each section and then move on to the next. The third core area which I would recommend reviewing is images. So there are vast amounts of images for each product on the website, on most websites, whether it's a model in the shoe or just the shoe or the model with the lifestyle background. Testing different variations is really, really good. The one problem you have with it is that if you supply Google with multiple images, you won't actually learn from it because it doesn't tell you which image is working best. However, one of the things which you can do is you can make sure that the primary image is the core image which you want to test, and then, start learning off the back of that. I'd be careful when testing this because it's not very clean way of doing it. So it's a very test and learn testing plan for that. One of the good things I will say is a few years ago, we ran a test at a department store, which I did some PPC for, and we were learning about fridges. And the fridges, we were like, how do we stand out when we sell the same brand as the 10 other brands which were showcasing fridges? One of the things we found is that all of them are just the fridge. It's just closed. It's just there. It's a fridge. So what we did is we tested that the fridge was open, and ours was open and everybody else's was closed, and our click-through rate increased on that fridge brand. So those are the things you're looking at when you're looking at testing images. But don't just think, oh, well, it's passed from the website, it's fine, because sometimes it isn't. And it's really good to test and learn and see what you can do to improve your click-through rate. And that is everything I'm going to share today. So thank you very much.
And thank you so much to Meriem for joining us today in the Zone. Be sure to stay tuned as we're about to get started with our panel. And if you would like to connect with Meriem Nacer, you can find her on LinkedIn. All right, let's bring all our speakers back on screen now to answer your questions. All right, this is PPC Zone, July 2024, and we're talking about making paid ads work from outside the platform. I'm your host, Jyll Saskin-Gales. I'm a Google Ads coach, ex-Googler, and the founder of Inside Google Ads. I created this event to elevate new perspectives and insights in our industry. I'm here with Thuha Wright, a paid search specialist who just spoke about GA4 tips for PPC. I'm here with Chris Ridley, head of media at Evoluted, who just spoke about how to bake business objectives into your KPIs and account. And I'm here with Meriem Nacer, a paid media consultant who just spoke about top tips for optimizing your Merchant Center feed. Thank you once again to our sponsors, PPC Live and Inside Google Ads. Let's dive into it today, panelists. We have had so many questions from folks who are watching live today. So first up, we have a comment here from Nava Hopkins, who said during Thuha's talk, it will be interesting to see if we get more flexibility with attribution now that cookies are safe. I know that cookies are staying is something we're all pretty excited to hear about this week. So Thuha, we'd love to hear your perspective. How does the fact that cookies are staying potentially affect our attribution in GA4?
So this is just my opinion, and I think Chris and Meriem and even Jyll can chime in at the end, but I think with the almost U-turn, because people are going to still have a choice as whether they're going to share their data or not, we're still not going to have 100% of the data. And so carrying on, we should still look at Facebook copy and look at enhanced conversions for Google Ads. So for me, I don't think anything changes, and I think we're still going to get a loss of data as people get more educated and are more protective about their own data.
So it seems like a temporary good news, but like still we should be moving towards things like enhanced conversions and offline tracking and all those things we were doing anyway to prepare.
Yeah, help protect humans and their data.
Absolutely. And next we had a comment here from Sophie Fell in response to Chris's talk saying, use your words is such excellent advice. I agree. I say that to my toddler. He's not using his words yet. But when you're speaking to, let's say you're, a freelancer or an agency and you're trying to use your words to speak to other people at your client, maybe people beyond the marketing team, what advice do you have for them, Chris, to get started if they've never done that before?
Yeah, when you're agency or freelance, it can be a lot harder. You have those barriers. You're not in the office. You're not seeing them every day. You might not know who to go to as well if you only have one point of contact. If you have a point of contact there, my first piece of advice is just ask them, saying, hey, I'd really love to learn more about your business. What can I learn? Like, who do I talk to? Is it worth me popping in for half a day, if possible, if you live close to them or commutable? Can I pop in half day and just pick everyone's brain and just sit there and work with you? And that's how I've got the best out of my clients. And when I was in-house as well, I used to badger everyone. They got sick of me at the end because I just asked questions, but it helped me learn the business and help promote them as well. So it was net positive in the end.
Got it. And then we actually have another question here from Sophie for Meriem. Do we have a deadline for a force switch, Meriem, to the new Google Merchant Center next?
I don't believe we do, and I don't believe that's going to happen anytime soon because it's not there yet. Considering they only released supplement feeds a couple of weeks ago, and we use, most people I know use supplement feeds like all the time, it feels like not everything's working. So I don't see them doing it before Q4 because that would be crazy. But you never know because it's Google, right?
You never know because it's Google. Well, we got some great feedback as well about the tips you shared, Meriem. Thank you so much again for your presentation. We have a question now from a LinkedIn user. Their name is Winfred, and they asked of Chris, how do you factor a long sales cycle, like between 6 months and a year, into your strategy?
Yeah, so I do this for a couple of clients at the moment, and this is where those lead to conversion rates come in. And this is also where kind of attributing it back and using UTM parameters to spot the first interaction when they make the inquiry and keeping that communication up with your sales team. What we do for one particular client is we have a spreadsheet where we track it all. For the last 4 years, we track when they converted, what we spent on that click. We do it just for everyone for that month. And then we say what the potential revenue could be based on whether a quote that they got offline or the average value. And then we update it every month with actually what revenue we got from them. And you have a nice line graph that grows every month, and even old points on the graph will change as well. It's really nice. I can, if you drop me a LinkedIn message, I can show you an example without the data, like sensitive data, show how it works as well.
Great. And to those who are here with us live right now on YouTube or on LinkedIn, feel free to drop a comment for our panel. We can answer your questions. But I understand that Chris actually has a question for his fellow panelists. So go ahead, Chris.
I do. I got one during the panel, actually. So Meriem, you mentioned about you're not sure that they'll force us into next anytime soon? Do you think when they do it, will be like a GA4 style where we'll have big countdown clocks and where it will be a real push?
I hope so, because that would just give me content to push out onto my social media. But
That would be great, wouldn't it?
yeah, definitely. But I hope not, because it did give me like heart palpitations every time I used to go into GA and be like, oh, it's still not working, conversions aren't working. Because of I don't know how the supplement feeds are going to migrate over and how cleanly they're going to migrate over. I've not tested it yet because I think it will kill half my clients and I don't have the capacity in my brain to try and do it. Not this month anyway, but I might try at least one as long as they approve. If any of them are watching, be careful, I'm coming for you. I will ask somebody probably next month when I can watch it like a hawk and test it, and I'll let you know after.
And my second question was, do you have any advice for anyone interested in split testing changes in a product feed, like a title, image, or Google product type? And how can they check and compare performance has changed because of that little change they've made, rather than it just being seasonal?
So if you have a feed provider, then most of them normally have like tools and stuff which do testing. A lot of my clients don't have feed providers because they don't really have the budget for that, and somebody to manage their PPC feed, a PPC account as well. So what we tend to do is we'll choose something like a category. We'll have a look at Google Trends. We already know the account. We already know their products and their data, and we'll say, right, we're going to do this across these. This is what we expect, and we will plan it out. It's all about the data. Just make sure you've got enough to go back at least a year. If you don't, then just monitor that category and don't make any other changes during that time, or you'll never learn from it.
Awesome. Cheers to that.
I have a question for Thuha. I'm one of those people who never implemented GA4 properly, and now every time I log in, it's still like, this was imported from Universal Analytics, and I know there's a lot I have to do. I'll be going to watch a replay of your talk to help me with that. But I'm curious, Thuha, when you look at different people's GA4 setups, we're now a year after Universal Analytics went away. Can you share what are some of the most common mistakes you see or kind of easy fixes people can do if they're still just not quite really into GA4 yet?
Oh, that's a really good question. I guess the ones I see quite common are, there's a bit, I always forget what it's called, but it's data retention, I think. So it's defaulted at 2 months, and you can choose, I think it's 14 months, and it might have changed even longer now, but the default is 2 months if you don't change it. And that impacts the data from when you use the exploration reports, which I didn't mention today. And then the other one is if you've got an e-com site, if you are taking payments through things like PayPal or some other payment channel, you want to make sure that that URL is in the cross-domain section, and that's really, it takes me a while to even find that. So that's why not many people miss that. But yeah, those are a couple. There's quite a few.
Those are good tips. I definitely have not done a user retention thing in mind, so I'm going to have to go do that afterwards. Thank you. We have a question here from Matt for Meriem. Any clever ways to make less exciting B2B e-com products stand out on shopping? All the Gen AI things in GMC Next are very B2C focused.
I'm not going to lie. Yeah, they are 100%. So how can you make... I recently did a feed audit on a B2B client, and they do... Are they B2B? Yeah, they do like tools and stuff. So it's like circuit breakers stuff and things. And you can't make that look pretty. But the one thing I have found is that half their imagery isn't actually that good. And when you go through it, you can see like blurred lines and things like that. One of the things I have seen some people do, and we did test it many moons ago, is changing the background color. Just a little bit. Like just a bit off-white. Test it. Don't do it on everything because sometimes Google spots it. We did try once to do a black background on a product, and it got disapproved within like 24 hours, and it was one of their top products. But we knew and we were prepared. But definitely just see what you can do. And I guess the Gen AI stuff will probably change the color of the background. So test it out, but be careful, because when you do, sometimes the AI tools like blur your product, and you really don't want to do that with some of the B2B stuff.
All right, now I have a few questions for our panel that are not necessarily related to your specific talks, because a lot of what we talked about wasn't actually stuff in Google Ads. So rapid front panel would love to hear, in this day and age, summer 2024, if you're starting a new search campaign, what match type are you using? Exact, phrase, or broad? What's your preference with the way match types work now? I'm going to call on Chris to go first. Chris, what are you starting with and why?
I'm going to do an SEO answer, and it depends.
Okay, I'll give more context so it doesn't have to depend. You're working with a small business.
Small business, I would start if they've got a real niche market and they've got real clear brands that they're working with. I'd go with exact, and then I would see how that goes, and then I'd go to phrase and gradually go out that way. But as I get to phrase, I'll probably add more exact keywords in before I go to broad, just to kind of keep control. If I'm using smart bid, I might use broad match then, but on a smaller budget.
Got it. And then Thuha and Meriem agree, or would you do something different? How are you feeling about match types these days?
I agree, but I found in some accounts that I've worked on, after a couple of days, exact match doesn't trigger anything. And actually putting it on broad triggers traffic, but it's not necessarily off the charts like back in the day, like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, it'd be wild. But it's quite tight now. So I'm not too scared of using broad.
The big bad broad. All right. And what about you, Meriem? Do you have a favorite match type you start with?
If there's no data in the account, I will always do exact and phrase. I'm pretty old school like that. I like my stuff on exact, the things I really want to own, and then phrase match to expand. Once there's data, then I do dabble in broad match, but it depends on the client, budget, and everything else. But yeah.
Okay, different controversy for you now. Pinning, headlines, and RSAs. Do we do it or not? And why or why not? I'm going to start with Meriem on this one. How do you feel about pinning?
Only if you have to. I know clients who have to say certain things in this, so that you have to pin it, you have no choice. But if you don't, just be careful of what you're adding, because recently I've seen a lot of ads which just don't make sense because all the headlines say the same thing. Not headlines, sorry, description lines all say the same thing, and it just doesn't make sense. So don't pin unless you have to.
All right, Thuha, Chris, do we agree, disagree? Pinning or no pinning?
Yeah, I'll quickly go first. So I adhere to not pinning, but I get that some clients want their brand name to be pinned, and that would make sense. But some are just starters and nobody's really heard of the brand. So pinning is no go.
Chris?
I'm still kind of doing my own split testing with it at the moment. My preferred method is to have one with as many headlines and descriptions as I can without feeling like I'm repeating myself, and then a second RSA in the same ad group, which only has the ones I know performing best in positions that I know they're performing best. So I'll pin those. Then I'll have the other one kind of going while kind of A/B testing all the combinations. And other accounts where I don't have the chance to do that, I will just kind of maybe pin 2 to 1, pin 2 to 3, pin 2 to 2, making sure that there is no repetition of what I'm saying. I normally do that as well.
So you've got a method to the madness here, Chris.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I got one more controversial question for y'all before I let you go today, before we wrap up PPC Zone July 2024. My third question is about, okay, you're launching a new campaign. Your goal is conversions of some kind. What bid strategy do you use for a new campaign when you first launch it? Manual CPC, max clicks, max conversions, something else? Where do we start? I haven't started with Thuha yet. So Thuha, what bid strategy do you start with? Brand new campaign.
This is controversial, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna admit it. I go for max clicks.
Great. Tell us why do you like max clicks?
Well, the max conversions, it doesn't. If you don't have the data for it, it'll just act like max clicks, but you don't have a max CPC buffer. Well, I think the other ones all need data. So if you haven't got any data in it, and Who has time these days to manually change your CPC?
All right, Thuha starts with max clicks. Chris, Meriem, what's your go-to starter bid strategy?
Go on, Chris.
Okay. I am also, if there's no data in the account at all, I am a max click person. However, if there's data in the account and I can do a bid strategy portfolio, I will then go with either max conversions with target CPA or max conversion value with ROAS target based on what bid strategies already have in place. But yeah, I did it the other day. I set one up. I forgot to do the manual CPCs. It was all set to £1, and I wondered why it wasn't running. You know, you don't get tripped up like that with max clicks. That's what I'm saying.
It'll spend your budget. What about you, Meriem? What's your go-to starter bid strategy?
I'm old school.
Oh, bring it on. Tell us why.
So I prefer manual bid because I like to know my base. So I will go in with a base CPC, especially with generics. Brand, I will normally, we won't include brand in that. Generics, I like to know a base CPC. So I will figure out a base CPC using the keyword tool. I will say, this is what I want for this campaign. Let's see what we can get. Give it about 48, 72 hours, depending on the budget. Obviously, if they've got a tiny budget, completely different. But if they've got the money, see what data we get and then flip it over to max clicks once I get an idea of what CPCs I can already get. Sometimes I feel like our CPCs get inflated by the bid strategies when sometimes they don't need to be. So that's why I like to play it a bit safer.
Well, and I love, this is one of the many things I love about our industry, the reason we have events like ppc Zone. There's no right or wrong answer. There's so many ways to drive good results. And actually, my answer is different than all of yours. I always start on max conversions. And my reasoning is because max conversions is a smart bidding strategy. So it takes into account a lot of different signals to set those bids that max clicks and manual CPC wouldn't. But that doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just different ways to do stuff. So, thank you, everyone, so much for joining us at PPC Zone July 2024. Thank you to Thuha, to Chris, to Meriem, and you for joining us today. Our next event will be on August 13th, 2024 at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. UK, 8:30 p.m. India time. We look forward to seeing you there on YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok, or Instagram. To learn more about PPC Zone and our wonderful speakers today, or to apply to speak at an upcoming event, visit ppc.zone. I'm your host, Jyll Saskin Gales. You can find all of us on LinkedIn and be sure to follow me to stay up to date on future events. I look forward to seeing you next time in the zone.